Welcome back to episode 16 of the Double Down podcast presented by WaterWave. Today is Friday, February 3rd, and I'm excited to be back bringing you guys another episode. I was super encouraged to see that you guys love the most recent episode. Episode 15 actually got the most listens and the most views. So I appreciate you guys staying with us and enjoying more episodes. I'm really excited about season 2. It's off to a great start, and I'm just excited to follow up with more and more great episodes. Before we jump into our episode today, I just want to take a second to look into the Double Down Weekly wrap up, talking about, kind of my updates. So in terms of my knee, right now where I'm kind of at the sprinting phase. So just kind of started sprinting last week, opening up to like 75, 80%, just sprinting. And it's a straight line, nothing too complicated, but it feels good to kind of allow yourself to get back into those, athletic body movements and feel like you're an athlete again. So that's kind of been the most exciting and most encouraging part, of my days and of my week. So, and then in terms of sports, Super Bowl's around the corner, but right now we're all in on the Timberwolves. I actually had the opportunity to sit courtside earlier this week, and it was one of the coolest experiences I really ever had. I've never sat courtside before, so it was an awesome time just interacting with the guys and the refs and just like the little nuances of the game. Me and Malik Monk were actually talking like the whole game, so that was pretty fun. And yeah, it was just a cool opportunity. So let's head into our featured interview today, sponsored by royaltyfam.com. Make sure you go check out royaltyfam.com for all your sports and loungewear needs. Find great prices on the hottest sportswear of 2023. Make sure you DM us at double_down_podcast for a discount code to royaltyfam.com. Today's featured guest, a former Wisconsin Badger, the 2013 consensus second team All Big Ten honoree, appeared in 119 career games with 72 starts for the Badgers. He's actually the all-time career block leader in Badger basketball history and went on to an illustrious pro career overseas from 2013 to 2019. I'm super excited to welcome in my trainer, a friend of mine, and the podcast, Jared Berggren.
Thanks for having me, P. Happy to be here.
Yeah, Jared, happy to see you, man. We go way back, and I'm excited to get you on the pod and talk about little college hoops, bring it back a little bit. So let's get it started. Growing up in Princeton, Minnesota, when did you kind of know basketball was going to be a part of your future? I'm sure you played all the sports growing up and doing all the little things, but when did you know that you had that passion for basketball?
Yeah, my story is honestly different than a lot. I think growing up, I'm 6'10". I was always tall, so I was always, naturally good at basketball from that standpoint, at least. But I was in Princeton. I wasn't really doing much. I was just kind of doing my thing in small town Minnesota. And then once I got into high school, started getting a little bit more serious, but still, nothing really. And then my sophomore year, we had a senior on the team. I was starting varsity at this point. We had a senior who ended up going to Southwest State, so he had like all the NSIC schools kind of recruiting him.
Yeah.
And these D2 coaches were coming in. They're seeing me. I was probably 6'8" at the time as a sophomore. They're like, this big kid, like he could be all right. And they're asking like, who's he playing AAU with? And I was like, I don't know. I didn't know what AAU was. I wasn't doing anything. I was just sitting in Princeton doing my thing, And then they're like, oh, you should get connected with Howard Pulley. So after the season gets done, I go down, I find out, information for like tryouts, whatever. And at this tryout, I end up going head to head with Trevor Mbakwe, right? Future Gopher at that point.
Yep.
And I remember Trevor like posts me up and he like hits me with the shoulder, spins off me and dunks on me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I've never seen anything like that in my life. This is like, it was a rude awakening there, but apparently I must have, fought back and done my thing a little bit because they actually, so I was 16 at the time, ended up playing mostly on the top 17 team, sometimes on the second 17 team as well, through that spring and summer. So I went from being completely unknown and making the top team with Pulley. A couple months later, we're playing in tournaments against, I think my very first tournament actually that we went out of state, we were playing against Blake Griffin. and
Oh wow.
he's dunking everything and just crazy. Where so we got Blake Griffin, Kemba Walker, some of these future all stars. That's like it was just a whole different level for me, and I came out of complete nowhere. Like I said, no one knew who I was, and then
Hmm.
a couple months later, I was top 100 rankings or whatever it was, and I had a bunch of Big Ten schools and schools around the country, recruiting me, and by about December, January of that year, I'd already committed to Wisconsin. So it was like a crazy whirlwind process for me, where I went from
Wow.
complete, nobody to within, maybe 8 months, already, climbing the rankings and committing and all that. So it was a unique process for me.
Yeah, that's gotta be a crazy process because Princeton's small town, but it's not, you're still close enough to the cities where it's like kind of the basketball culture and you know what's going on, but you don't kind of know that how serious AAU is. And especially at that time, AAU was, still in its, growing phases and it's not
For
quite
sure.
what it is today. So yeah, definitely interesting process. Kind of take us through that Wisconsin recruiting process. Was it an easy decision for you? Did going to Wisconsin kind of something that you wanted to do early, or how did that process kind of, take about for you?
Yeah, so it was I think early on, they were definitely a front runner from the beginning.
Mm.
And then really what it came down to, there was a couple other schools I liked. I really liked Purdue. I liked Coach Painter. He was there already.
Yeah.
I liked him. I liked Iowa State. I took a visit there when it was McDermott was the coach
Hmm.
there.
Yep.
Um, I liked him. It really came down in the end. I knew I wanted to stay close to home. It was basically Minnesota, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
All my friends were kind of pushing the Gophers, and but to be honest, growing up, I didn't have like I was like kind of a Gopher fan, I guess, but
Yeah.
I didn't really care that much. Like I didn't really like watch games all the time. I don't think I ever went to a game like as a kid.
Yeah.
So I didn't have like a strong connection, even though like the home school, and that was just I think just kind of my family situation. Like my dad is not a sports fan whatsoever. Like to this
Really.
day, like like he's enough, where he like came to my games all the time stuff. But it's like
Hmm.
his interest is like outdoor stuff, like hunting, fishing,
Yeah.
shooting guns, working on
Yep.
cars, like that kind of stuff. So it's like
Love it.
sports are just not his thing. My mom, she had a bunch of brothers where they all played
Hmm.
sports, everything. So she was more around it. So like, you know, Sunday afternoons, like I'm watching the Vikings game with my mom, and my
For
dad's
sure.
like
For
asking
sure.
questions. You know what I mean? So it's like we have a different situation there. But um, so yeah, like I said, it really came down to Minnesota, Wisconsin. I took a visit, not to trash your boys here, but I took a visit to Minnesota that year, and the program was kind of in a rough point in time there, where it was Dan Munson was the coach. They lost, and it was just it was wasn't a good environment there. Munson actually ended up getting fired like shortly after that, and
Mm.
things were kind of up in the air. And then I took a visit out to Wisconsin, and it was at the time they were really rolling. Um, and they had the game I went out there for. They were playing against Pitt, who was ranked number 2 in the country at the time.
Oh wow.
And it was like Dick Vitale on the call, like ESPN game, all that.
Cool.
And they ended up winning. And they had Brian Butch, who he does some stuff with Big Ten Network now.
Hmm. Hmm.
When I showed up, they all the guys were joking. They said I looked like Butch's little brother, so they were calling me like Baby Butch, right? Because we're like same body type. We even
Yeah.
like facially look similar.
Hmm.
So I see, and Butch had like a great game. He had like 30 points and all this. Like, so I see like literally myself out there, like thriving in their system, like big time win. I'm in the locker room after the game, like hanging out with a bunch of the guys that were, guys like me that I could see myself getting along with. And to this day,
Hmm.
I'm, great friends with a lot of those guys. And then the other part of it was Jordan Taylor
Yeah. Hmm.
was my teammate. So we were playing together with Pulley, and Jordan committed. He committed really early, so he committed like earlier in the fall of his junior year. So he had already committed, and he was kind of in my ear, like, "What are you waiting for?
Yeah.
Come on, let's do this. Let's team up. Let's go there." And so then eventually, after a couple months, I pulled the trigger, and it felt right. Like I said, it was it just the style of play, the culture, the coaches, the all that stuff was it just felt like home. So it was at the end of the day, it became a fairly easy decision.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and you talk about, I was going to mention that as well, Jordan Taylor, Mr. Basketball. He's committed early. I bet he was in your ear all the time about, and and John Lure was already there, Orono guy,
Yep.
another Minnesota guy. So you kind of have that, Minnesota connection, which is huge.
Yeah,
Talk about
exactly.
talk about those kind of expectations coming in. I think oftentimes, obviously freshmen, want to come in and make a immediate impact and help the program, help the team. What kind of expectations did you have coming in? You probably came in summer or early fall. How did you feel coming in, and then what were your expectations for the upcoming season?
Yes, I mean, like I said, as a recruit, I was, fairly highly rated. Not that that necessarily means anything at all, but
Yeah,
you get these expectations on you. You're a top 100 kid or whatever I ended up being. And then we had Brian Butch, like I just mentioned, right? Butch was graduating, and Greg Steamsma, who played in the NBA for I don't know 7 years. I bet he played for the Wolves for a while, and
yep, yep.
both of them were graduating. So I'm like, all right, they got two big guys, leaving, lots of minutes to fill. So I'm looking at at the situation. I'm like, all right, this is perfect for me to step into and maybe get minutes from day one. So that was my mindset. Then when I got out there, it was a little different story, and it was, you learn it's a big jump going from Princeton,
Yeah.
Minnesota to playing in the Big Ten. So there was a lot I had to learn. Um, you know, Physically I had to get stronger. I had to learn the system, get experience, all that kind of stuff. So I ended up, taking a redshirt year that first year, and even then, I wasn't like the way it went down really was the decision to redshirt or not was totally on me, right? So it was
Hmm.
they weren't telling me like, oh, you're not going to play. We want you to redshirt. They were like, yeah, you can do whatever you want here, right? And we are just kind of open upfront about it and talk, and I basically told them if I earn my way into the rotation where I'm going to get like meaningful minutes, I want to play. If you're just going to throw me in at the end of the game for garbage minutes, like I'd rather save my year. So we
Hmm.
kind of played it out through the first part of the season. It was like I was going through warm, red shirts normally are sitting in sweats on the bench, right?
Yeah.
So I was going through. I had a jersey on, everything, and I was going through warm-ups, and I was ready. And they're like, let's just play it out like this. We'll kind of see what happens. And then as we got through a little bit, it was like, all right, once we got to, especially through like the non-conference play,
Yeah.
I wasn't really finding my niche in practice yet. So it was like, all right, I'm going to take this red shirt. But at that point, we'd already kind of been doing it, and it was kind of different. I actually just kept warming up the whole year, so I never actually had, and there was really like no reason for it. But I remember Coach Guard, like one of the things he said was just like, if you're doing this and you can at least get kind of a feel, like you feel more
Hmm.
like you're in that environment when
You
you're
do.
actually going through the warm ups and all that. It's like you're going to hear it from the fans and the layup lines and all that stuff in the beginning. It's like it's not going to make a huge difference, but it's going to make potentially make you a little bit more comfortable next year when I'm hopefully in a role to get more minutes. So it was kind of different how I did that, but yeah, so that's kind of how that the first year went, and then every year, I kind of really had to pay my dues to get to that point. You mentioned
Yeah.
John Lure, right? John was 1 year older than me, and John was a great player, all Big
Yeah.
Ten, all American, right? Played in the NBA for I think 8 years, however long he lasted, and so John was going to get the majority of the minutes ahead of me, and then there was another guy, Keaton Nankerville, who was the same class with John, and Keaton was a really good player too. Keaton played overseas for probably 6, 7 years, and both those guys were ahead of me. And kind of the way we did things was our rotation was generally 7, maybe 8 players deep for the most part. So it
Yeah.
was like there wasn't a ton of minutes available. So then that my redshirt year or my freshman year of eligibility, I was playing a little bit, but I was stuck behind these guys. And then, sophomore year, same thing. I was playing a little bit more, but it was, same situation. I was stuck behind those guys. Some games I'd play 15, 20 minutes. Some games I'd play 5 minutes. Some games I wouldn't play at all. And it
Hmm.
was definitely frustrating. Um, I don't think I ever like really considered transferring, which I've talked about this recently with the way college sports are now. It's a different
Yeah.
landscape, right? Players have the full freedom to leave and all that, and it's more commonplace. And I'm honestly thankful that the things were the way that they were at the time, right? Because I think
Hmm.
if it was as common as was to leave as it is now, I maybe would have got someone in my ear and been like, yeah, maybe I do need to leave. But
Yeah.
I stuck it out for 3 years of not having a great huge significant role, and then finally my junior senior year, my fourth and fifth year in the program, once those guys graduated, I became, the full-time starter and was able to work my way up. So I was, I'm thankful I stuck it out, but it was definitely a challenge. It was definitely a grind for 3 years there, really.
Yeah, and I think it's hard either way as a red shirt, because you feel a part of it, but also like you're not going to games. Because I redshirted as well at Northern. It was like, you still feel a part of the team and you still feel a part of everything you're doing, but at the same time, it's like there's that little divide, and it's it takes a tough guy to kind of fight through that divide and kind of see the big picture at the end. But we also talk about a lot about like the self assessment of yourself, like knowing, hey, I got to get stronger. I got to
Hmm.
improve this aspect of my game. I got to learn the system a little bit more. Taking that year to kind of do that can be a blessing as well. And I'm grateful for my experience in that, because it kind of allowed me to grow a lot as a player, especially my freshman year.
Hmm.
So yeah, talk about kind of that freshman year, and what happened with the shoulder, and how did that kind of impact the sophomore year, and kind of give us a story on that.
So it's a it's a great story, honestly. So
Can't wait.
so yeah, I ended up tearing my labrum in my shoulder,
Hmm.
my redshirt year. So it was my shoulder would pop out all the time. It would what's called a sublux. So it wasn't a full dislocation where it would pop out, but it would go right back in on its own.
Yeah.
So the first time this happened, my redshirt year, and then I played with it for the remainder of that year. We figured, we could just kind of rehab it in the off season. It might
Mhm.
not need surgery, but then basically once you would pop it out again, everything would just kind of get like stretched out and loose, and it would just pop out more and more. So I did
Yeah.
that my whole freshman year of eligibility here too, right, where it's popping out all the time, and then finally after my freshman year, I finally got the surgery on it. But how it happened, so when we play, and they still do this today, when we play at the barn with the raised court, this was the thing Bo Ryan was doing since, I think, like the story is like his first year coaching in
Yeah.
Wisconsin. They're playing there, and someone dove off the floor, and it was like this big, hustle play, whatever. So he wants everyone to get comfortable with that floor. So what he makes the freshmen do every year, first time we take a trip there, at the end of practice, he'll roll the ball out of bounds. We have to dive and save the ball and then fall off the floor to get comfortable with the court here. So I go to do that. I save the ball, and I fell weird. And I felt my shoulder. It popped out, but like I said, it went back in, right. And then I'm laying on the ground, and then apparently when I saved the ball hit my foot and then still went out of bounds. So coach is like, "You didn't save it, Jared. You got to do it again." And I look at the trainer, and I'm like, "Dude, I just popped my shoulder out." And he's like, "You got to do it." So I did it. I did it again right after popping my shoulder out, and I have some little roll, and I'm like, coddling my shoulder here. And then that was literally, that's how it all started, was that stupid raised court at the barn.
Yeah.
And
Well,
then
that's
from there, it was literally, yeah, it was like, about a year and a half of me dealing with that. And wasn't fun, man. Wasn't fun.
that's actually back-to-back podcasts of injuries at the barn. I had Robbie Hummel last week tearing his ACL at the barn, you rolling off the court, your
Oh, I didn't
shoulder at the.
realize. Yeah, I didn't realize I was at the barn that he did that. I was actually just listening just to kind of hear how you do things. I was listening to a little
Yeah.
bit of it, but I only got about 15 minutes in, probably. Yeah,
Yeah, so yeah, we're gonna the barn's cursed right now on the pod.
it's
Hopefully
cursed.
hopefully the next pod doesn't have a barn incident. So
Right, right.
we gotta pick somebody that didn't play at the barn maybe. But yeah, that's kind of a interesting thing, because it's a thing that, like, I think Minnesota's fans are kind of supposed to like hate, quote unquote, like, oh, this is the corny Wisconsin like roll off the floor things. But like I kind of
Right.
love it. Like I'm like, why, it's like this, it's like this tradition thing, and it's like it's been passed down. I think Bo probably started it, passed it down to Coach Guard, and it's just like
Yeah.
a tradition thing, and every freshman's got to do it. So I think it's kind
I
of a cool
told
thing.
yeah, I told Guard I was out there this past fall when Jordan Taylor got inducted into the
Mm.
UW Hall of Fame. We're sitting at the football game, and I'm talking to Guard, and I told him, "Yeah, man, you know how I hurt my shoulder? That was it." So I told him he's got to scrap that. I don't think he's gonna just tell you, you got to figure out how to fall better. Which, I mean, I
Yeah.
guess he's right. You got to get comfortable with it, I guess.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious. Yeah, so that shoulder ended up, continuing to bother you, continuing to be something you had to deal with. Eventually, you guys decided to get surgery. Kind of take us through that kind of, process, because surgery can be a daunting thing, I think, regardless of of what kind of surgery you're getting. One of our teammates, Jamison Battle, had to get a bone removed in his foot. A very minor surgery, but still a surgery. It can be a daunting kind of task. Kind of take us through that process and how you decided with your trainers and docs that you're going to get surgery and what kind of emotions you were kind of feeling.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it was something that lingered for, a year and a half, something like that. And it got to the point where my shoulder was just so unstable. It was
Yeah.
the worst one. I remember we were going to it was like before the season, we are doing like individual workouts and we were just warming up and I literally nothing hard, like just the weakest dunk ever. I just went up and like basically laid the ball in and like barely grabbed
Hmm.
the rim and my shoulder just popped out just from doing
Yeah.
that. So I was like, I couldn't do anything, extending my arm, reaching overhead. There was just no stability there. And then that was right at like the start of the season. So I'm like, I'm not gonna have the surgery right now and miss the whole year. So
Yeah.
I played through it and it was, I wasn't like I said, I wasn't like really gonna be in the rotation. It definitely hindered me because there was a couple times, actually there was once we were playing in I think it was in Maui. We were playing against Derek Williams. So
Hmm.
when he was at Arizona
Arizona.
and I
Yep.
was playing well and I was, first half, he goes up for like a dunk, and I stopped, pinned him on the glass or whatever, blocked his dunk, I popped my shoulder out. So I'm like playing, and then after that, it's like, oh, I'm hurt. So I was like, make a good play, but it's like my body just couldn't hold up through the grind of it. So so anyways, we kind of knew as we got towards the end of the season, it was like, all right, let's get this done as soon as the season's over. And
Hmm.
it was literally, I think 2 or 3 days after the season was done, we had the team doctor. He kind of specializes in shoulders anyway, so he did the surgery, and it ended up being about a 6 month recovery by the time I was
Hmm.
fully cleared to get back in play. So that was the whole spring, whole summer, into the fall that I was not able to do anything, and working on left hand hook shots and
Yeah.
whatever I could
Yeah.
do, and it was tough. But then and then once you get back, it's the physical challenge is there, but the mental challenge is big too. So I remember one of the early practices, once I was cleared, because it was I basically had like right when the season started, when we started like real practice, that was like my first like full go.
Yeah.
Um, and we're in practice, and there's a loose ball, and I dive on the ball, and someone dives kind of on my shoulder, and I'm like and I'm yelling, and then like I stand up, and I'm like doing one of the like kind of rolling my shoulder
Hmm.
around, and Bo just looks at me, and he goes, "You're not hurt. I just scared you," and I was like, yeah, you're right. Like he just
Yeah.
saw
Yeah.
through it
Yeah.
entirely. You know what I mean? It's like I
Hmm.
was expecting it to hurt, and I was scared because yeah, like I said, it was that's the mental piece of it. We're learn to
Yeah.
trust it again. So he's like, hey, you're fine, man. It's in your head. And I was yeah, absolutely right. So that's a big part of the challenge right there is just learning to trust your body again, and both sides, the physical and mental. Like I said, it's a challenge for sure.
Yeah, I was gonna actually ask, like, when did you have that kind of, that mental breakthrough? But I'm assuming that was maybe one of them, where
I
you have
think
that.
that's the one. Yeah, that's the one that sticks in my head for sure. I would say that's probably got to be the one where it's like, all right, this thing is sturdy again. I can take a hit and I'm going to be all right. And I think
Mhm.
from there, it's I don't know. That's probably the main one, but I think it's just kind of a daily thing, day by day. It
Yeah.
slowly kind of trickles out of your mind that you can go back to just doing your thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's right, and I've gone through it once, and I'll, go through it again here coming up, but it's like it's that process where it's like, hey, you babied your shoulder along for six-ish months. You babied your knee along for 7-8 months, and now it's like, hey, now it's time to get back on the court. Like now it's time to do what, you were planning to do for so long. And there's that
Mhm.
there's that mental hurdle. I remember Coach Johnson asking me last summer, early in the summer, he's like, have you crossed that mental hurdle yet? And I told him yes, but I didn't quite think I had quite yet. And it wasn't until I
Trying to
was
speak it
actually
into existence. Yeah.
exactly.
Yep.
But it wasn't until I actually like did a hard jump stop and like powered up for a dunk that I was like, oh yeah, I can like, my knees are feeling good. Like I'm feeling
Right.
what I'm supposed to feel. So I think there's
Hmm.
that's a beautiful time. It's the one of the most fun times because it's like, hey, we're back. Like we're excited to get back into it.
Yeah.
Which you
Absolutely.
do, you start that next year out. Kind of take us through your mental thought process of like that year, coming off of injury. You just spent the whole last 6 months rehabbing for this season. You're probably close to 100, but you still, you're on the brink of that. Kind of take us through like what you're expecting for the year, and then how that kind of year, ends up for you.
Yeah, so I mean, that would have been going into my sophomore year then. So like I said, it was
Hmm.
still, like kind of the situation wise, I still had John and Keaton ahead of me, so I still knew, minutes weren't going to be quite what I was hoping that, that I would eventually get to. I knew I was still going to be kind of behind those guys, but I remember having some times where I was playing really well. Actually, I remember specifically there was like a Saturday morning practice. And we just treated it like a scrimmage. So it was like leading up to right at the start of the season. I remember having like a great practice for whatever reason. This
Hmm.
day, stands out in my mind. I was hitting shots. I was, making strong moves inside, blocking shots, whatever it was. I remember playing great. And then, like I said, once we got into the season, it was John and Keaton that were already playing heavy minutes for the last couple of years, and it was, coach was trusting those guys more. And there was one random game that I started, as a sophomore that year, and it was I think he started all three of us. He slid John to the three, and we were
Oh,
playing
wow.
against Illinois, and they had this, I can't remember the guy's name. They had a really really tall front line that was, because then we had Keaton's like 6'8", probably. Me and John 6'10", and they
Hmm.
had like similar height where they had a tall three man like that. So it was one random game I started, and I'm like, oh, here we go, and it's like, yeah, I'm back to down the stretch. There'd be games where it's like I'd play 5 minutes in the first half, and second half, it's like I don't get off the bench.
Yeah.
So it was frustrating. Again, going back to just that, kind of paying my dues a little bit and waiting my time. So it was a challenge, but at that point, I didn't have it was almost harder in some ways because at that point I didn't have the injury excuse.
Yeah.
Like my
Hmm.
redshirt year, my freshman year, I could kind of be like, well, if I was healthy, I'd be getting more minutes. And then
Hmm.
now it's like I'm healthy, and now sometimes, like I said, sometimes the minutes were there, but sometimes they still weren't, and it was just kind of a product of being behind guys that were more experienced and were, coach
Yeah.
didn't have that trust factor in me yet. So it was, I had to continue to kind of grind through that and, eventually earn my way in. And then, like I said, once they both graduated, junior, senior year was, able to ramp things up a little bit more and, step into a bigger role.
Yeah, yeah, you go into that, 2011, 2012, that junior year, you end up starting all 36 games. You got 60 blocks that year, which is actually third in Wisconsin for a single season. You were, scoring 10 and a half a game, having a pretty solid year. Kind of take us through that year because you guys ended up having a pretty good year as a team as well. Kind of take us through that year, like the difference of coming off the bench and getting spot minutes versus playing 36 minutes. I mean, not 36 minutes, 36 games, starting all 36 games, kind of like being the guy in the front line. How did that kind of process go about for you, and how were you able to kind of just like stay grounded with the more success still?
Yeah, I mean, I think just like I said, being around for so long and just seeing
Hmm.
guys do it, ahead of me, I kind of just, it was like
Yeah.
it just felt right that it was like, yep, this is my time now. And I think, like my junior year, still having Jordan Taylor, right? So it would have been
Yep.
Jordan's senior year then, and Jordan, was one of my favorite teammates ever, right? So he was
Yeah.
he was great at just putting me in situations to be successful, and just he's great at, he's just a great teammate, right? Where he's
Hmm.
just kind of breathing confidence into people, and so having that natural, comfortability with him from knowing each other since we were 16 and playing together, and then like I said, just kind of being, going through the program that
Yeah.
junior year, I was able to step in and do things better, and I shot the ball pretty well. I think a lot of that was, like I said, having that good chemistry with Jordan. We get into our pick and pop stuff, whatever it was,
Yep.
and then going to my senior year, it was a little different situation. Jordan graduated, and it was obviously a huge part of our offense. And
Hmm.
then we had Josh Gosser, was kind of slated to be the starting point guard then, and then he ended up tearing his ACL in the preseason. So now we went from Jordan, and then Josh was going to take over with good
Yep.
experience, and then he gets hurt. So now we had Trey Jackson and then George Marshall were the two guys that were both, talented players, but were completely inexperienced at that time. I actually just talked to Trey like last week about this.
Okay.
They just weren't quite ready for that, and we struggled, especially offensively. We had some really big wins. We beat like Michigan a couple times. They went to the national championship that year. We beat
Yep.
Indiana a couple times. They were a one seed. We won at their place when they were ranked two in the country, and we had big wins, but our margin for error was small. So offensively, we struggled, and that kind of snowballed into me too, where we weren't probably getting good quality looks, and then I shot the ball really poorly. So it was my
Hmm.
my junior year. I think I haven't looked at my stats, but I think I shot, high 30s, 37%, something around there, 36%, whatever
Hmm.
it was from three. And then my senior year, I shot like 25%. So it was just I went way down, and it was like I said, I think a lot of that was losing Jordan and just getting, less high quality looks where he didn't,
Yeah.
didn't have the same gravity pulling towards Jordan. But um, and it snowballed mentally where I was struggling. I was, shooting the ball poorly. And
Yeah.
I think that's one thing. If I would have shot the ball like I did my junior year, my senior year, I think I probably would have had a pretty good chance to get drafted.
Hmm.
And it obviously didn't work out that way, and I ended up, playing in summer league and ended up going overseas. But it was overall it was a good career at Wisconsin. I mean, we had, like I
Yeah.
said, we had some good success, and we won a lot of big games, and a lot of great memories and connections there for sure.
Yeah, no, a great career. That junior year, you guys, have a great year. You go into the Sweet 16 versus Syracuse. A great year. You come back for the senior year. You get a win at Indiana. You get a win at Michigan against two really good teams. And then the time's kind of up, and it's kind of decide what's next. Take us
Hmm.
through that kind of process for people that don't know it as well. Obviously, it's like, hey, I want to go to the league. I want to go to the NBA. I'm going to play in summer league and see what's out there for me. And then you eventually take your career to Belgium initially. Kind of take us through that process and how it went for you, and uh, what made you excited to go overseas, and what kind of opportunities there kind of was for you.
Yeah, so I mean, I had good interest from a bunch of agents and stuff, and ended up having a couple meetings with some guys. Once the season ended up, and ended up signing with Priority Sports, so they're a
Hmm.
bigger agency based out of Chicago. And
Yep.
so pretty shortly after my season ended, I ended up going down there, and I was living in Chicago for
Yep.
basically that spring and summer, and training down there. And worked out for, I think, probably 12 to 14 NBA teams. So it was a really cool process, just,
Yeah.
kind of flying all over the country, and working out for teams, and going through these meetings with, the coaches, or management or whatever. And I had a couple teams that were interested. They said they were, kind of going to look at me with the later second round pick. And
Hmm.
ended up going undrafted, but played. So then I ended up playing summer league with the Magic. So it was, at the time, it was Orlando was hosting a summer league down there. So I was
Oh,
playing,
cool.
in Orlando with Orlando in the summer league there. Um, Ended up being not the best situation. So Orlando was, they were struggling then. They were young and trying to rebuild, as they have been for a long time now. But so they ended up actually having like six or seven of their like actual NBA roster guys playing summer league, which is not the norm.
Yeah.
Like, you have
Hmm.
like your rookies that you just drafted, and like maybe one or two like second year guys, but
Yeah.
they had like seven guys from their roster that were still playing summer league. So it was, minutes were a little more sparse than I was hoping there. So I played there, then I ended up going out to Vegas and finishing out summer league with Cleveland. Not, it was a little bit better there, but I was coming in late, and it wasn't an ideal situation. Probably could have gone to I could have gone to training camp with a couple different teams. But 99%, right, you end up going to the D League, or G League as it is now. And it
Hmm.
just, the structure of it wasn't great. For my
Yeah.
style of play, probably
Yeah.
wouldn't have been a great option to do that without any kind of, guarantee, or, like now how they have the two-way deals. If I could have gotten something like
Yeah.
that, maybe I'd stick around. But it was much better deal to go over to Europe, right? So I ended up going to Belgium. And crazy thing there is, I actually went to Belgium when we were like 16. Me and
Oh,
Jordan,
really?
our AAU team, we went to Belgium, which
Oh,
I've
wow.
never heard
Weird.
of an AAU team doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I don't
was
know
like,
why
what
we did
the?
that. It was super bizarre, but I ended up, actually, I'd been in the city that I signed in was called Ostend, and we'd been there before. So I found pictures, like, there's a city on the coast, so it's like the North
Hmm.
Sea is right there. I got pictures on the beach, and I'm talking to my teammates as I got there, and I was like, yeah, I came here before. And one of them
That's
was
funny.
like, oh, and we played you at this gym, blah blah blah. And it's like, so I had played against one of my teammates there, which was like crazy small world for,
Yeah.
to get that connection. And but it was a really good situation there. We had a very good team. We won the championship both years I was there. We played in Euro Cup. We actually played in a Euro League qualifier tournament. So it was,
Mm.
the structure was a little bit different there, where it
Yeah.
was an 8-team tournament, and if you won the tournament, you got the last place in Euro League.
Mm,
and that my rookie year, we made it to the championship. We beat a couple big teams, a big team from Russia, and a team from Turkey, and we get to the championship, and it was against the host team. There was a Lithuanian team that was hosting the tournament, and that
yeah,
was my first like crazy, European environment where it's, it
that's
was a
awesome.
big arena, and they got the big flags and the drums and the
Hmm.
flares going and all that. And it was like, we ended up losing that, but so we played in Euro Cup, which was, still really, really high level stuff,
Yeah.
and was a really good spot to start out my career.
Yeah, no, that's exciting. That European basketball culture is interesting for sure. I've never experienced it personally, but just seeing videos and you can kind of testify on that kind of end of it. But
Yeah,
yeah, so
it's fun, man.
yeah, no, I mean it looks exciting. They're rowdy. It's the same way.
Hmm.
I kind of turned into a big soccer fan this year, so I watch a lot of Premier League and I watch a lot of Champions League and that kind of stuff, and it's the same kind of things. They always got their shirts off and they're waving their
Yeah,
shirts and they're just
they're
going
passionate. Yeah,
crazy. Yeah, no doubt.
they live for it. It's crazy, especially some of the other countries I got to. Belgium wasn't quite as passionate, just generally there, but I
Yeah.
went to Italy a couple years after, and Italy is they're wild there for sure. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and you're, excited to start off your career. You decided to start off your professional career, and see where it takes you. But unfortunately, you had a couple hiccups along the way. Kind of take us through those meniscuses that you deal with. Meniscus, for the people that are listening, is it's in the knee. It's a little C-shaped guy in the knee. It kind of keeps your knee stable, keeps your bones from crushing on each other. And you end up having a couple tears of those. Kind of take us through that early process in your professional career and kind of how you dealt with it.
Yeah, it was tough. It was really frustrating. So, you get over there, and it's obviously, it's a different style of play. And like I said, our team was really good where we had a really balanced team. So we had,
Hmm.
12 guys on the roster, and most games we'd play 11 guys, if not all 12. So it was like no
Wow.
one was putting up, crazy numbers. It was a really balanced system. And kind of it can be hard to find your way in that a little bit of, what's
Hmm.
your role going to be. And
Yeah.
we get a couple months in, and I start kind of figuring things out. And I actually had the week before I got hurt, we're playing in Euro Cup, and I actually won like Euro Cup Player of the Week. So I had really good game there. Um, and then that weekend playing in the Belgian league, I had almost like identical stat line, like back to back, like really good
Hmm.
games. I'm finding my stride here. I'm playing great. The next game in Euro Cup again, tear my meniscus. And it was
Mm.
weird too, because it wasn't like I, landed and felt something like pop or anything like that. It was just I played the game. After the game, I was like, man, my knee's sore. And like the next day in the airport, I'm like, man, my knee is like really hurting. And I kept playing on it for probably at least a month after that. And it
Oh
started
wow.
started swelling up a little bit. And for whatever reason, in hindsight, this is very stupid, but for whatever reason, I never got it checked out. And we had a break coming up for Christmas,
Mm.
and we actually got like a week off, which is rare too. So I actually got
Yeah.
to come home for a full week.
Oh
So I
wow.
played, until that week, and they're like, "Oh, you just have some inflammation. You just need some time off. You'll take a couple days at home, and you'll be good." I was like, "All right." So I come home, and I remember trying to get some shots up while I'm here, or like get on a treadmill and run a little bit, and my knee was just like giving out on me, like it felt like
Mm.
it was gonna just collapse.
Yeah.
So then finally, once I get back out there, then I finally got an MRI, which again, I don't know why why it took this long to do this, but finally got the MRI, and then they said, "Oh, you have a torn meniscus," which the meniscus injury in itself, there's degrees to it, like any
Yeah.
injury, but a
For
lot of
sure.
guys will have a tear, and you can potentially just play on it forever. Just kind of
Hmm.
depends on what your symptoms are. And like I said,
Hmm.
mine was giving me that feeling like it was going to give out, and it was swelling up and really bothering me. But we had a big, so I come home for a week. I go back to Belgium for that week, and I get it tested, and they find the tear. Well, that weekend we had a big like rivalry game, and they're like,
Mm.
we really want you to play, want you to play." So I'm like, all right. And they said, like I said, you can theoretically play on it without making it worse. So
Yeah.
I play through that weekend on it, limping through. And then, after that, I'm like, all right, I'm getting this thing cleaned up. So I actually flew back to the States to have the
Hmm.
surgery. And I went to my agent had a connection with he was actually the Bulls team doctor. So he did
Okay.
like Derrick Rose, Greg Oden, like a couple like high profile surgeries
Hmm.
there.
Hmm.
And he said it was very routine, look, nothing, abnormal. So they just kind of scope it out, and it can be anywhere from a couple weeks to a couple months, kind of depending on how you want to rehab it. Well,
Yeah.
my team was actually really nice about it, where they said, we're not going to rush you back. They actually signed a player to kind of replace me for like 2 months. So they're like, well, you
Hmm.
take all 2 months, get this thing nice and strong, take your time. So it's like, all right. So that was nice how they handled it, because I was on a 2-year contract there, so they knew they didn't
Hmm.
want to mess up my knee right away.
Yeah.
So I take my time with the rehab. Everything's feeling great. I come back, I start playing, feels perfect. I feel like myself again. I can jump, all everything.
Yeah.
Couple days probably after I start playing, it starts like swelling up on me again, and they're
Mm-hmm.
like, "Oh, it might be normal, just kind of getting back into it." It just keeps getting worse and worse,
Mm-hmm.
swelling up on me. I had to get my knee drained a bunch of times. Like I did like a cortisol shot one time. Like it was just, it bothered me all season. I kept playing on it, and then after the season ended, we win the championship. I go home. I go back to the same doctor. He looks at it, the MRI, everything. He's like, "Yep, same tear again." Like it
Mm.
just. And then he's like, "We can scope it out again." And he's like, "It might work. If it doesn't work this time and it keeps breaking down," he's like, "then you start looking at like, microfracture surgery and some different
Yeah.
things that." And
Hmm.
he's telling me this, he's like, "Oh, you're a smart guy though, right? Like you got an education. You'll be okay if you can't play anymore." I'm like, "Dude, I just finished my rookie year. Like I'm sitting here thinking I'm gonna play for 10 years, you know?"
Yeah. Yeah.
He's like, "If you can't, if we do the surgery and it doesn't work, like you'll be okay." And I remember leaving his office and like calling my wife, and I was just in tears, man. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
that was a tough pill to swallow. And he's like, we'll try, we'll scope it out again. But he mentions, as he's saying that, he's like, I can't name names. Then as he's talking, he mentions like Derek Rose and Brandon
Hmm.
Roy and Greg
Hmm.
Oden, and guys that just had notoriously terrible knees.
Yeah.
So I'm like, that's, and he said for whatever reason, some guys just break down like that and their knees don't tolerate the surgery.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I'm thinking that could be me. So I'm like, I'm just praying, we do the surgery and it's going to work. And,
Yeah.
knock on wood, I go do the surgery a couple days later, and it was, since then things have been good. I still get a little bit of pain. Like you said,
Yeah.
that meniscus is kind of the pad in between your femur and your like your shin bones, right? So it's
Yep. Yep.
uh so I have like some bone on bone going there now, where, as they take that
Yep.
pad out, you get some of that just. So I'll
Hmm.
feel it. I'll feel it every once in a while if I jump too hard, or kind of cut the wrong way doing stuff
Yeah.
now. I'll feel it, but it didn't give me too much problems. But it was definitely kind of, you lose a step a little bit when you start doing
Yeah.
a couple surgeries like that twice and within like
Hmm.
6 months. And I think I didn't quite have the same, explosiveness and things that I had, through my last couple years in college. So
Yeah.
it was definitely a setback there.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a kind of a scary process starting out your professional career. You obviously want to have a long professional career, play as long as you possibly can. And to start it out that way is it's scary. It's makes you nervous because it's like you know what you. I think I'm kind of in the same field. It's like what you can bring to the game. You know that you can play professionally. You're talented enough, but it's like if this little thing
Hmm.
keeps breaking down on me, like how am I supposed to get through it? There's no other option, especially when you hear a doctor talking about like, hey, you have a backup plan, right? I was kind of in the same field, where my doc
Yeah.
told me initially, he's like, you might not be able to come back and play, high, major basketball, high Division I basketball, professional basketball. Like that kind of
Right.
news from like a professional, like a doctor is like super daunting and super like scary. And it makes you
Hmm.
nervous. You talked about, breaking down with your wife and, just praying for it. I was kind of in the same field where it's like, what is this going to be? Like, what is this, gonna lead to? And,
Right.
eventually you end up working through it. You ended up playing for 6 years after that until 2019, having
Hmm.
a great pro career. You mentioned going to Italy, being all over the place. Kind of just take us, with like a brief kind of, update on your pro career and how it kind of, ended up going for you. And then, when you decided to hang it up.
Yeah. So then, like I said, coming off the knee, the next year I went back to the same team, and it was, like we talked about with the shoulder, it's, you have
Hmm.
that process of learning to trust it again. And, that was obviously challenging. But again, another solid year. We won the championship individually. Like I said, our team was really balanced, but um, that's kind of more the norm in general over there. Teams don't always expect you to put up, 20 and 10, right? Though if you
Yeah.
put up like 8-6 on a good team, like teams will be like, oh, he plays his role well, you know.
Hmm.
So I had a chance to jump to a better league. Actually, it was the team that I got the when I got Euro Cup Player of the Week. That was the team we were playing against. Was
Oh
a
wow.
team in Italy.
Hmm.
Um, and they'd kind of been watching me for a couple years, and they wanted to sign me. And they saw me. So my role in Belgium was really just pick and roll. I was diving to the rim. I was getting dunks, and that was the
Hmm.
majority of my offense. But they kind of saw me from college where I was doing more like pick and pop and stretching the floor, and
Yep.
they thought I could get back into that type of role. So go there and started the season with that type of system. And then the coach got fired. Well, actually, the a new owner bought the team and he
Oh
just
wow.
blew everything up. So he brought in Juwan Johnson. So
Oh.
talking about
Hmm. Yep.
with your boy Hummel here, right? So
Yep.
Juwan
Yep.
was
Yep.
playing for this guy owned another team in Russia, and then he bought this team and he brought Juwan Johnson over, and then he brought in a bunch of other like high level like EuroLeague or ex NBA guys, and
Yeah.
just blew everything up, and it turned into just a nightmare where we had like too many imports. So guys were, some games I'd play, some games I'd be, in sweats on the sideline, and it was just a bad situation. And so I
Yeah.
left there, kind of midway through the year. I went to a different team in Italy, and finished out the season there. But having that, kind of a little bit of turmoil in the middle of the season
Hmm.
you kind of it prevents you from kind of hitting your stride a little bit. And so that year was tough. The next year I went to Italy again for with a different team again, but it was a really fun year there. We had a team that was kind of up and coming. They just kind of worked their way up to first division.
Hmm.
So the expectations weren't super high at that point, but we ended up coming like one game short of making the playoffs, which was a good success for us, just based on kind of how the club had been growing. And was
Yeah.
actually playing with Marcus Landry, who was
Oh
played
wow.
with him at Wisconsin, so he was a senior my freshman year, and so we were playing together over there. It was cool. Um, at that During that year, my wife got pregnant with our daughter. Um, so that was a different ball game
Hmm.
there too, right? So then the next year, she was born in the States. My daughter was born in the States that next summer, and then I ended up going to Japan, which was a
Yeah.
different world there. So it was, you have an adjustment to get into Europe, right? And then there's a whole other adjustment to get into Asia.
Yeah.
It's the culture and the style and everything there. And I went over there. I had to leave like 2 weeks after my daughter was born, which was tough. And when I went there, it was a bad fit from day one. Like the
Hmm.
style of play was not at all the type of player I was, and it was,
Yeah.
I was struggling with being away from my family and all that, and I was in a bad place mentally, and I struggled big time there. Like I was
Yeah.
horrible. I was just telling a kid
Hmm.
I was training the other day, I was the worst basketball player in the world. For that, the couple months I was there, I had the yips like none
Hmm.
other, man. I couldn't do
Yeah.
anything. It was just, I was in a bad place mentally. Um, and then I ended up getting cut there, which was, like literally, thank God it was, just get me out of that situation.
Yeah.
I ended up, coming back home for a little bit, and then went back to Japan again,
Oh wow.
which was an adjustment again. But I was out there by myself. My family stayed home, and
Hmm.
it was a challenge. And I started losing the fire a little bit. Where when you have
Yeah.
a kid, it's you're either my wife and daughter are here around their family, or they're over there with me, and
Yeah.
away from grandparents and cousins and aunts and uncles and all that. So it's
Yeah. That's tough.
that was a different challenge, but I knew I didn't want to quit on that note. So I went one more year, and like I said, I had kind of a bad year overall in Japan.
Hmm.
So I went to Switzerland for my last year, which is a little bit of a step down in terms of the level there, from where I had been, but that was kind of the reality of having a bad year, like I said. And then it was better. I enjoyed it more there, but it was, by the end of the year, it was really the family thing.
Hmm.
That was hard. Where just, I was questioning all year, like, do I want to keep doing this? And then my body kind of started telling me too, is I had
Yeah.
a hip issue that there was literally times where I'd be sitting on the couch before practice and I'd stand up and I legitimately could not walk. Like my hip was just
Mm.
locked up, and I eventually, worked through it to go practice, and dealt with that through the whole year, and just found a way to, do just enough to get warm and get loose. And
Yeah.
but it was, my body was kind of telling me, along with the family situation, that it was time. So kind of hung it up after that, and had a chance to go back overseas to Belgium, where I started, different team but the same league, and it just didn't feel right. Decided to hang it up and come home, and kind of got connected here with doing what I'm doing now, working as a trainer, and be able to
Yeah.
share my experience and what I learned through my career, and try to help out the next wave of guys and help them achieve their dreams and their goals.
Yeah, no, I mean, that kind of transitions us into, our last and final question. We always talk about on the podcast about, adversity, whether it's, a shoulder injury, whether it's a knee injury, whether it is injury in general, whether it's, some other adversity that you're fighting through your life. And now you kind of have that platform where you can obviously give back in terms of, skill on the court and, player development, but also kind of be a voice of, not of reason, but kind of a voice of, maybe suggestions or advice or something
That experience that I can lean on,
yeah,
and yeah, kind of
exactly,
I've been
exactly.
there, right? That Yep, for sure.
Yeah. So what kind of advice do you have for a guy maybe that's going through an injury or dealing with, not making a team or some sort of adversity coming up in their life? What kind of advice do you have for them?
Yeah, for sure. So that's something I run into a lot, as a trainer now. And like I said, I think that's one thing that has really equipped me,
Hmm.
to be able to help these kids, is the fact that I have gone through these struggles. I've gone
Yeah.
through, my situation at Wisconsin, where I basically sat for 3 years,
Yep.
right? And had to sit behind some better players, to be honest, right? And then
Yeah.
I go overseas and I have injuries, and I end up in situations that, one that was out of my control with the ownership change in Italy, and one that was, on me, but it was a bad fit, and I
Yeah.
played bad. But I went through a couple situations there where it was like I'm changing teams mid-season because of different circumstances. So
Hmm.
I've had those hardships, and I've had those times when I feel like I can't do anything right on the court, right? And I've been able to talk to kids, fairly regularly, where it's like, I had a
Yeah.
conversation the other day with a kid who's like, man, I was playing great early in the year, and now I'm slumping, and I feel like I can't, I can't make any shots, and I'm in my head, and I'm like, dude, I've been
Hmm.
there. So it's just, in terms of like the playing itself, I always talk about trying to find, a one little step at a time, one
Hmm.
little victory, right? So it's like,
Yep.
don't go out there and say, I got to go score 20 points tonight, right? It's like, can I make one shot, or maybe not even make a shot? Can I impact the game somehow? Can I get a steal, a deflection? Can I set a good screen? Can I
Yep.
make a good pass? Can I run the floor hard and draw help and free up someone else, or anything, right? So it's like you just try to find one little thing, and then kind of snowball it into bigger and bigger things from there. And
Yeah.
or the other side of it, where it's not even the game itself. Sometimes it's just your mindset in general, where it's
Yeah.
like,
For sure.
just keep in mind, like, I've been posting stuff on my Instagram about this lately, where it's it's your success and what you do on the floor is not all that makes you you. You know what I
Yes.
mean?
Yep. Hmm.
There's more to you as a person, and your family's still going to be there for you, your friends are still going to be there for you, and all that stuff. Where it's like, at the end of the day, like, playing the game it's cool. We love it, right? That's what we do, but it's not who we are. So just trying to keep that message in mind of,
Yeah.
there's a lot more to you. There's a lot more value you provide as a person than just, playing well or winning games, or whatever it may be. So keep that perspective is definitely key too.
No, that's great insight. Jared, thank you for taking your time, hopping on the podcast with me. Another great episode, with a great career, great player, but a better dude. I'm happy you could hop on with the podcast with me. For those of you that are listening, make sure you guys check back in next Friday for what will be episode 17 next Friday. So we're chugging along, and we're keeping it going, and we're gonna have a pretty special guest on next episode, a WNBA player. So make sure you guys tap in for that one, and are excited. Turn that bell on, and you get it going. But Jared, thank you for coming on the podcast. We appreciate you, and we're out. Peace.